morning, League fans. It is Wednesday. This is the third and last no match day of the week, and this show only runs when there is no match. So we'll be back next week when I think I'll be in France. And speaking of France, the news about the Test match on Saturday week has been really interesting, with our colleague John Davidson revealing in the Eye that the England players are only going to be paid £250 per match, and of course that compares very badly with even what they were paid last year, let alone what players in other sports are paid. Jason Costigan's news has been leading on the fact that the RFL or Rugby League Commercial haven't responded. They have now responded, and the response is that this was a bargaining position. It was thrown up, suggested, and it's certainly not a final figure, and also that the players will receive per diems when they're in camp, which will be for the second half of next week. So there you go. There's some movement on that story, which was easily the biggest story yesterday. Another thing I can kind of foreshadow for you a little bit, which maybe you've heard tossed around in various places, is that from next year, the team that wins the championship is likely to take on the Elite One winners in France on an annual basis. Yes, just like the Tres Tournois from back when Paul Sirenen played in it in the 90s, but they're not going to adopt that name because they thought it didn't go so well. so it'll be called something else. But it's kind of seen as an alternative to having French teams in the lower divisions, which is very expensive and carbon footprint and all that sort of thing. I'd still like to think that until there is a fully professional national competition in France, that we can still have teams from there like Catalans and Toulouse, if they've got the resources and the will, taking part in the English Rugby League pyramid. And of course they've called for teams to apply to play in League One next year. So that's it. Obviously, it's in Australia. It's still a sort of very much Origin-dominated news cycle, and here in the UK, the teams are having their midweek presses. And yesterday, I went to 2 Zoom presses, one for Wigan, one for Lee. So in that kind of melange of content over the next hour in Good Morning League fans, you'll hear a bit from Adrian Lamb and Matty Pete. So let's go to a break. Welcome back to Good Morning League fans. I explained this yesterday. For those of you who weren't listening, we used to have basically all rugby league talk on this station. We've been going now for about 8 weeks. And a big shout out to Paul Fairs, who's the genius behind rugbyleague.com. And we have moved away from all talk because there were a number of reasons. There were technical reasons, philosophical reasons, but they were mainly practical reasons. Practical reasons. Doing it was pretty much impossible, to chop up all the podcasts and to keep them current, because each podcast became out of date at a different time each week because they're about different teams, and those teams played at different times every week. So it was very hard to get a consistent program throughout the week, a consistent schedule. So now we are encouraging people to go to rugbyleague.com and listen to the same podcasts we used to feature. We're encouraging you to listen to them on demand. Now, the League Express podcast is run by, you might have heard an ad here on rugbyleague.com for Total Rugby League. That is League Express, right, which has been going for years and years under Martin Sadler. And they have a great show, the League Express podcast, which comes out midweek every week. And this week they had the managing director of Oldham and former international in both codes, Mike Frodin, who obviously has enormous plans for Oldham. And Oldham is a great historic club for those of you listening outside the UK. A lot of people have great romantic feelings towards Oldham, and people would love to see them back in Super League. They were there at the very start of Super League. They played in the World Club Challenge in 1997. So let's have a little bit of a listen. Now, we haven't set up the page for the League Express podcast yet, so you can find it on the normal podcast platforms, but the page will be set up in good quick time, and you'll be able to listen to it on rugbyleague.com. But here's Mike Ford.
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast, guys. It's going well with Oldham. We've had control of the club for just over 12 months now, and we've made good strides in both on and off the field. We're currently sitting top of the League One, not having lost this year yet. Off field, we're back in the centre of town at Boundary Park.
And that's the crucial thing, isn't it, being at Boundary Park?
Yeah, Boundary Park is the home of Oldham Athletic, a 13,000 all-seater stadium, which puts us in the top 5 of rugby league grounds now for facilities.
It's a Super League stadium, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And hospitality there, we have an opportunity to earn extra revenue from hospitality, which we didn't have previously, moving out of the town and playing in various venues. You bring a potential player you're trying to sign, to play for your club, and you sit them in a box overlooking Boundary Park. It's quite an easy sell.
Absolutely. What's your ambition at Oldham? I mean, do you have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, or a 1-year plan? Or is it just you just want to win the next game?
Yeah, I think we want to certainly. The board of directors and Bill Quinn, our chairman, who's a fantastic backer of the club and very much involved day to day. We want to leave a legacy, Martin, and that legacy is our number one ambition is a pathway, is the kids. I left this club in 2001 to go and coach Ireland in the Six Nations in 2002, and since then the pathway stopped immediately. The reserve grade stopped immediately. So for 24 years there's been no pathway for kids in Oldham, and we can sit here now and name world-class players in both codes that have come from Oldham.
Well, Jake, you were just coming this morning to this podcast, and I think you walked past one, didn't you?
Yeah, I was walking, and I was actually overtaken, I must say, by the great Kevin Sinfield and his wife. They were sort of coming up from behind, getting through the wet weather, and I caught a glimpse of him just side on, and I thought, that's bloody Kevin Sinfield. So I should have yelled out to him, said, hey, come on the podcast with us. Great to see he's out walking the streets and not being bothered by too many fans.
And he's just one of many, isn't he?
Yeah, so Kevin just lives up the road. But number one's our pathway, Martin. My ambition is to, and I got a glimpse the other day. We trained at St Anne's. We're taking the club around the amateur community set up and training against St Anne's, Saddleworth, Higginshaw, and Waterhead. And at St Anne's the other day, one of our players, Kieran Tyra, who scored 13 tries in 3 or 4 games recently. A bunch of kids were chasing him for an autograph, shouting Kieran. Now,
that's marvellous, isn't it?
Oldham Rugby have not had the kids have had no heroes for the last 20 years. So the number one is a pathway, definitely. Number 2 is our facilities. A training facility called Melrose, where when we move on, we're just custodians of this club. When we move on, the Oldham Rugby have actually got a base.
Melbourne import Aaron Penne has touched down in England, but league coach Adrian Lamb is unsure if he's going to play against Leeds on Friday night. Here's Lamb talking about Penne and answering some questions about when he might make his debut.
Yeah, we'll name him in the squad. He trained today, but I'm always weary of players travelling that long haul across into the UK, and jet lag sets in and things like that. It is a short turnaround into Leeds, and I will give Aaron every opportunity, but I'm just going to monitor him this week and see how he goes. If he's not quite up to it with anything that he needs to tick off, especially the load and the meters, per minute stuff, the high intensity stuff, and the distance covered, it may be not until we play Wigan. So we'll make a decision on that probably right up until game day. Yeah, no, he's had his first session with the squad today. He trained here on Saturday, and was also here when we arrived back on the bus from Caplan on Sunday to greet all of the players. It's a long trip. That one, I don't know how Caplan do it every other week. Took us, I think, 9 hours to get home from when we left there till we got here. So it was a long day for us. But Aaron was here when we got off the bus, which was a nice touch, and got to meet all the players and train with the group today. So it'll take a couple of weeks to settle in. All the international players do. So it's going to make sure that he settles in quicker than what a normal player would have done at the start of the season. Well, he's a big body for starters. I think he's 6'3" or 6'4". He's explosive, which is my type of sort of player, and he's also he can be aggressive defensively. So I guess he's been in a system there at Melbourne, which is probably one of the best in the world in the sense of how they develop their players. So, I'm hoping that he's got all that up to speed, and we'll work all of that out. And if it's not quite there, my job is just to make sure that I bring him onto a player that he needs to be in as quick as we can. So I'm pretty excited to see him in the team. We've sort of in the time here, we probably haven't had a really gun bench or a bench that can be real like a game breaker. We've had players at times that have come off and done a job, but it's probably an area where we haven't been the strongest on in competing. So he'll probably come off the bench to start with, and if we can find his feet there, I think the fans will love him.
On the first ever episode of Good Morning League Fans last week, we told you about Joe Gardner, the filmmaker who was embedded with Wigan this year. And he's picked a great year, of course, to do it, because at the moment they hold all 4 available trophies. The Super League Trophy, the League Leaders Shield, the World Club Challenge, and the Challenge Cup. So yesterday I went to the Wigan virtual press conference. It was a real press conference. It wasn't virtually a press conference, but it was just on Zoom. And I asked Coach Matty Pete about the project.
Yeah, we love it, Joe and his team. I don't know exactly what the end result is going to be, but I know that they've been with us through thick and thin this year, right from our pre-season camp in Portugal, through the World Club Challenge preparation. They're in on a lot of training days, most of our game days, behind the scenes. So I know they've picked up an unbelievable amount of content, and whatever they decide to do with, I think that, is going to be, there's going to be a lot to choose from. And I think, Wigan fans, rugby league fans, sport fans might want to see some of it. That's not for me to judge. But as far as the way they go about the business, I think they're ultra professional. The lads accept it. I think everyone knows we're pretty open when it comes to the media, and it's just another stage in us trying to give some insight. And you've seen Sam's documentary. I think if it's anything like that, it'll be good to watch.
Are there any boundaries set, and are you and players mic'd up in games?
Yeah, mic'd up, players mic'd up, staff mic'd up. No boundaries. No, I think that'll be all gonna. There's what there is trust between us and Joe and his team, and the club will have some saying what goes out at the end, I'm sure. But we've had a few interesting moments along the way. But I think it's built on trust, like any of these projects. But yeah, we're pretty open with what they filmed. There's been a lot of good content captured so far. I know that.
Interesting conversation on Twitter while the show is airing, really. And I'm Steve Mascord on Twitter, SteveMascord, X it is now, whatever. But just, it's an annual thing. I try to make the point when people say, how can these guys represent Samoa and also Queensland or whatever, that Origin itself is a construct to counter economic migration, just like in these international rules we have at the moment which are very similar to the rules in other sports, except we allow people to switch more than other sports do. But Origin was invented, and I remember in 1980, it was a Sydney Premiership, and all the best players played in the Sydney Premiership because they had poker machines in Sydney. So the likes of Rod Reddy and Arthur Beetson and these guys, they went south for money, and Origin basically turned a moribund concept, which was interstate football, because it was lopsided, because basically the best Queensland players were going to Sydney and they were playing for New South Wales against Queensland. It seems foreign now, but that's the way most of the provincial representative sport works. It's you live there and you play against the other province. So what Ron McAuliffe and Ken Arthurson did was that they agreed that for one game they would allow or send the best Queenslanders in New South Wales back to play for Queensland, which is a very novel concept. And I remember Steve Ricketts telling me that the Brisbane Sun got a phone call saying, when's the American Rugby League team playing? And they said the American Rugby League team said, yeah, this state of Oregon I keep hearing about. They got a phone call at the office that day, you know. So there was certainly no guarantee it was going to be successful, and it was a very novel idea, and for a few years there, it continued only if the series was already decided. Only if New South Wales had a 2-0 lead would they play Origin. Then it went to 3, and then it wasn't played in Sydney for many years because it was considered a project that was purely to engage the Queensland public. It wasn't there for New South Wales public, you know. So it's changed so much over the years, and people forget that it was, I know from a Queensland point of view, this is sacrilege to say it's kind of fake, but it's not really fake because now international rugby league is played the same way, where if you live, wherever you live, you return to represent your country. If you're a Burgess brother or whatever, or Herbie Farnworth, whatever, you come here to the UK to represent England. That's another way things work. But again, it didn't then. Back then, Cronulla would not release the Sorensens to play for New South Wales. To play for New Zealand. So the world has changed, a lot in 44 years. But here's what I'm saying, apropos of that. If we don't need Origin anymore because there are 4 NRL squads in Queensland, right? So the players aren't going south for opportunities. There's 200 opportunities in Queensland. So just from a logical point of view, we don't need Origin now. I know we do because it's so valuable. It's a cultural phenomenon and lots of stuff. But so if this year's series was played on residential grounds, under the old rules, residential grounds, what would the teams be? So we've got another show next week, which will be coming to you from Toulouse or Perpignan, I think on like Monday or Tuesday. So I thought I might put the call out. Pick your 2 New South Wales versus Queensland residential teams for Origin 2. Pick them. And we'll read some of them out on in the next show, the next episode of Good Morning League Fans. Finally, for today's show, a really nice little moment in the Adrian Lamb presser when he was asked about his memories of playing against Rob Burrow. We'll see you at the start of next week from Toulouse. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, I think one of my last games for Wigan I played, and I remember getting off the try line and it was at at Headingley, and I remember him running inside of me and me taking a few steps to go in and make the tackle on him, and before I knew it, he was 10 metres away on the other side of me running around to score a try underneath the post. I just remember looking, thinking, what the heck's just happened there? Just real closely built to the ground, and just his acceleration was second to none. Then he had that little duck in him. So unless you're getting down low at that level to make the tackle, he was a hard player to defend against.
Leeds have crashed to their worst loss of the season, 18-10 away to a Hull side that previously had just 1 win to its name for the whole year. Coach Rohan Smith is copying it from fans, and he was asked after the defeat what his message to those supporters would be.
Yeah, that game's filled with promise, and there's a lot of talent, and there's a lot of belief in the group, and they're a very connected group. So the message is the boys will stick together, and we'll keep working hard, and we'll own our mistakes and make it the best week we can in prep.
To most people, Leeds' 18-10 loss to Hull is their worst of the season because of the year the winners are having. Hull have just 1 victory in 2024, and that was against London, whose only victory has been against Hull. But at the media conference, I asked Rhinos coach Rohan Smith whether that's the way coaches think, and whether context and the other team's record influences his view of a result. In short, is a loss worse when it's to a poor team?
No one's at it's just about today's game. Like, I think it's irrelevant where the ladder position is today until after the game, where you go, geez, that's a missed chance, for us. Hull have been playing with high energy. They've got some players back from injury. They've recruited a few. And they're a stronger group than their ladder position suggests, probably. And they played with high energy today. As I said, I thought we generated more opportunities than they did, but scoreboard doesn't lie sometimes.
Just following up on that news, which was in our bulletin on the hour,
Rohan Smith has departed Leeds Rhinos after that loss to Hull on Saturday. Here's a full statement from the club. Leeds Rhinos have agreed by mutual consent that head coach Rohan Smith will step down with immediate effect. Smith joined the Rhinos in April 2022 and steered the club to the Super League Grand Final in his first year, having agreed a deal until the end of the 2025 season. Smith joined the Rhinos from Norths Devils, having worked with a host of NRL clubs throughout his coaching career of over 20 years, including New Zealand Warriors, Sydney Roosters and Penrith Panthers. He was also a head coach of Bradford Bulls in 2016. The Rhinos missed out on the playoffs last season and last Saturday lost their 7th game of the season, leaving them currently outside of the playoff positions, albeit just 4 points off the top 4 in the most competitive Super League season for years. Commenting on the decision, Smith said, "I had always stated that it was a long-term project to establish a team that will be able to have sustainable success, and I believe that we have assembled a roster that can continue to push for a 2024 playoff spot. The supporters can get behind the boys and give them their support. Friday will be a special night for the club, and we wanted to remove the ongoing coaching speculation and distraction. Celebrating Rob's life, the great work done by the club and Kev for the MND community, and playing well is the focus for Friday. I believe this team can still achieve great things, and I am proud of the work that the coaching team have done to develop players, especially the next generations. Unfortunately, I will not be head coach to see this development continue, but I look forward to watching the club's future successes and wish everyone at the club all the best for the future," added Smith. Leeds Rhinos Chief Executive Gary Hetherington commented, "It is always disappointing to lose a head coach, especially someone like Rohan, who has done so much good work behind the scenes since his arrival 2 years ago. At that point, we were sat near the foot of the table, but he invigorated us to reach the grand final with an incredible run of form. However, it is fair to say that Rhinos' results and performances this season have not met all our expectations to get us back to where we want to be. The board has a long-term strategy for where we want the club to be in the future, which started with the appointment of Ian Blease as our first sporting director. Ian is now carefully considering our options moving forward before making his recommendations to the board. On behalf of everyone at the Rhinos, I would like to thank Rohan for his dedication and hard work as head coach. It is rare to meet a coach who is so passionate about rugby league at all levels as Rohan, and personally, having brought Rohan and his young family over to England, it is sad that his time at the club has not brought the success I know he so much desired and we both believed possible at the outset," added Hetherington. Sporting Director Ian Blease added, "Whilst I have only arrived at the club recently, I've seen from my meetings with the rugby staff and players how well respected Rohan is. We must manage this change carefully so the players can focus fully on their performances, starting this Friday against Lee. My review of our rugby operation is ongoing, and clearly the scope of those recommendations will now need to widen with Rohan's departure. That process starts now to appoint a new head coach who we believe will be talented and suitable to take the club into the new era. Assistant coaches Chev Walker and Scott Grix will take the final training session of the week on Thursday and will be in charge on Friday night against Lee. We then have no game next week for the international break, so that will allow us to plan further into the future." One of the great podcasts you can access via rugbyleague.com is By the Balls, hosted by John Davidson, and it hasn't got its own page yet on the site, but we're just sort of rearranging things now after we switched to playing a bit of music. But anyway, John is with us now from Sheffield. And a big news whenever you're a sports writer covering any competition is when a coach departs, and that's just happened in the last hour. No surprise, John?
No, I don't think you could say it was a surprise. Rohan Smith's been under pressure, ever since the finish last year, and then this year's hardly gone to plan, and then losing to Hull FC, one of the worst teams in Super League. I think his cards have been marked since that loss.
Yeah, now, the arrival of Ian Blease just last week at the club, where he started on Monday, and then this decision, is that just a coincidence, or are there manoeuvrings, machinations going on behind the scenes?
I don't think it is a coincidence. It was interesting, his first comments when he got the job. He didn't necessarily throw his full support behind Rohan Smith. And anyone who sort of follows Leeds or aware of them has seen that the fans have been, calling for Smith's head for quite some time. So I think, to persist with him would ruffle more feathers at Hadley. And also there's a massive game on Friday to honour Rob Burrow. It's World M&D Day, a home game against Lee. So I think by eliminating is probably not a word, but departing Rohan Smith from the job, it probably improves the atmosphere somewhat. That guarantees perhaps that there won't be boos aimed at the team in what will be a very emotional evening.
Yeah, it's pretty damning, isn't it? I mean, you would normally think that getting rid of a coach in the lead up to such a emotional, positive occasion would put a downer on things, but the fans are so fed up that actually a sacking actually would cheer them up. It's quite remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's always a vocal, minority and sometimes a vocal majority in the social media age, isn't it? Whether it be on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever your medium is of choice, people can express their opinions a lot quicker, and it seems to be, the dominant opinion on social media, but also at the ground as well. There's been a lot of boos in recent games, and most recently during the loss to Hull FC. So I think this will placate a lot of the fans, but I mean, it will be interesting who they get in, because you would imagine they don't have a head coach lined up, considering, he's the record. They sit in seventh, so the season's definitely salvageable. 7 wins and 7 losses is not the most damning record, is it, when it comes to performances?
Yeah, so I mean, no one seems to be able to have any success at Leeds. So where did it go wrong for Rohan? He just wasn't able to. He was able to turn things around in a short frame when he arrived, but he wasn't able to have a positive influence over the medium term. Is that just it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably fill 24 hours of your station on the reasons, but obviously he came in midway through 22 when the team was struggling very badly, managed to somehow get them to the grand final, which was an amazing achievement, but they were very poor last year, finished 8th. There was a number of players, sort of messy departures. Cruz Leeming, the captain, he left. Blake Austin, they lost Sam Walters at the end of the year. There was a real clean out of the roster at the end of the year, and the club spent a lot of money on bringing in Brodie Croft and Andy Ackers and, a couple of players from the NRL, so there were really no excuses this year, but the performances just haven't been up to scratch. It's a very passive defence. They don't seem to, their forward pack gets beaten every week. I think personally the recruitment's been quite poor, and the players just aren't firing for whatever reason. As I said, the defence is ridiculously passive. Their attack's not working, and they just they haven't been able to beat any of the top teams while they've eked out wins against some of the clubs around them or below them. The likes of London. They're not being competitive against St Helens or Warrington.
Is Paul Riley the favourite?
I think he's the strong candidate. I mean, he was obviously basically signed, sealed and delivered at Hull FC and then changed his mind. He's long been seen as a target for Leeds. He's probably the best available. Well, when I say available, he's obviously contracted at Salford, but available English coach who's perhaps likely to jump ship. There's not really a dearth of local coaches out there, I would say, who would be a good fit at Leeds. Someone like a Danny Maguire would be a risk because he's not had a head coaching role before, and he knocked back the Castleford job early in the season. There's some other coaches out there who've had head coaching roles in Super League, like Danny Ward, but he's an assistant at Hull KR. So I think Paul Rowley is probably the favourite, whether he wants the job and wants to leave Salford, where he's doing a fantastic job. They just beat Warrington on the weekend, and they're flying high. So whether he wants that job or not is probably the sticking point. But again, it wouldn't surprise me if Leeds looked down to the NRL to a coach down there.
Well, John, where can people find you? It's time for you to do a bit of spruiking. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Patreon at rugbyleaguehub.com long reads alongside the sparkling coffee that you produce. You can also find me in the iPaper at inews.com if you search for rugby league and/or my byline. Also, sporadically featuring the likes of 4020 magazine, loverugbyleague.com, and League Express.
And don't forget By the Balls, which was
of course
when we were playing podcasts 24/7. We featured your podcast a lot, and now in the future you will be able to listen to it on demand via the website. Thanks for joining us, John. A big news breaking day in rugby league, and as I said, I guess. It is sad definitely sad when a coach gets sacked. So obviously it upsets a whole family life, and it's a big wrench, and I'm sure it's a very emotional day for a lot of people. Some people, as you pointed out, their emotions will be very positive. But anyway, thanks, John. It's nice of you to give us some of your time.
No problem at all.
Another great podcast that you can access via rugbyleague.com is, of course, 4020. Every Monday night that they go live. And also they just happen to be, and Phil Caplan, who's about to join us, has been involved in the Leeds club for decades. And he's sort of been the voice of reason a little bit in recent times when fans have been screaming for Rohan Smith's head. But alas, Rohan will not be there on Friday night, Phil. How are you feeling?
A little bit deflated, to be honest, because I think, like you, we know him more as a person rather than a coach, and he's a good guy. He's not a self-publicist. He's not one of these people that courts publicity, and that may be part of the reason for his downfall. But he's genuinely caring. He's a family man, and he's done quite a lot behind the scenes that he wouldn't take credit for. So I can understand why, in a results-based industry, you look at the performance at Hull and where we are in the season, and obviously a chance to rectify it and still make 2024 a little bit more special for the fans. I get all of that, but there is still a hint of sadness that it hasn't worked out for him.
It's interesting. On Saturday we were both at Hull, and it was kind of, there was a kind of undertone of Machiavellian movements in a way. I mean, Tony Smith was there, invited to by Sky to be part of the commentary team, and he theorised that his cards were marked because of Richie Myler and Andrew Thurkill. It's hard to go through it for people listening and they don't understand who those people are and what it means. But basically, there's a chance for Hull to get new investment, and that was tied to the partner of the new football manager's dad, and that therefore Tony was. And he thought that it was already part of the remit, that was part of the decision, and he said that on TV. It was part of the decision for him to move on. And now we have at Leeds a new head of sport there with Ian Blease, who's come in, and we have his coach at Salford, Paul Rowley, who was approached by Hull and then turned it down, reportedly at the 11th hour, and so there's a hint of things building behind the scenes. An ending's already there, and the story just has to be written to get us there. What do you think of all that? What do you think about the recent changes at Leeds, and how much might be, or how much of the future might already be written as far as a coaching job is concerned?
It's a really interesting question, and if you love conspiracies, and if you do think that 2 and 2 makes 12, then clearly Ian Blease has been brought in to bring Paul Rowley from Salford to work with Brodie Croft and Andy Ackers, who were Leeds' main acquisitions over the winter period, who came from Salford. So clearly it's all there, it all makes sense, and I suspect it's not quite as simple as that. The interesting thing, just looking at the Leeds scenario, because I heard some of what Tony said, and I think the interesting thing for both clubs is that they're both talking about rebuilding. And Tony reckoned he wasn't given the amount of time, and I think Rohan Smith has started the next generation of young players coming through at Leeds, but he's not going to be given time to see that come to fruition, and patience these days in all walks of life, but particularly sport, is in very short supply. So I sort of can understand why people are now thinking, if Ian Blease is in post as Leeds' first sporting director, his first job will be to appoint the new coach. He will go back to the person he knows best, which is Paul Rowley. I'm not sure it's as simple as that. I think you've got to look at Leeds as possibly a slightly separate case and go back maybe to 2018 when Brian McDermott was sacked halfway through a season, which at the time seemed un-Leeds-like and a little bit rash. He'd won the grand final in 2017. Things weren't going well in 18. He asked for the remainder of that season to either go on his terms or start to put that right. Wasn't given it. So obviously you're into interim coaches. Then the next appointment is David Furner. And again, very un-Leeds, like if you look at the history of the club, lasted only 14 weeks. And then you're into Richard Agar, who didn't want to be coach initially, taking the reins and trying to stabilise the club. And then you're into Rohan Smith being Gary Harrington's antidote to exactly what Leeds needed to move forward. So the coaching appointments and the way it's actually worked out for the last 6 years don't reflect particularly well on the club, certainly in terms of what their overall vision and identity might be. So the next appointment, and how many times do we hear this, the next appointment? It was said about Rohan Smith, but the next appointment is a crucial one, and it's not one for winning a few games in 2024. It's what you're going to be in 25, 26, what your team's going to look like, what you stand for. And that appointment might not just be going to a rival club and picking a coach who would be a short-term fit. I don't know Paul Rowley well enough to know that if somebody who is making a name for themselves in a club where there is very little expectation and doing a magnificent job but under-resourced is the same qualities you need to go to a club where you are going to have everything you need, and you're going to have to be producing 3 news stories a day, whether you like it or not. There is no way of flying under the radar if you're in charge of Leeds. Go back to the mid-80s. Malcolm Reilly was appointed the head coach of Leeds, and Malcolm Reilly at that time unquestionably was the best technical coach that there was in this part of the world, and he would have been a shoo-in for any club job. And he was there for 18 months, and it wasn't that he couldn't do the job. All he wanted to do was coach. And what got him in the end and ground him down was the fact that at 7 o'clock every morning, the local newspaper was ringing him saying, "What's your story for today?" And he's going, I haven't got a story. No, you have to have a story. This is Leeds. There's a back page lead waiting for a story on Leeds. And what's more, I'll be ringing you again at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I'll need another one. And it's that kind of pressure. It's the surroundings. It's the fact that your training facility is probably as good as any that there is over in this part of the world. There is no excuse culture for being successful, and that's a pressure in itself. And I've seen it over a number of years there that, if Leeds win 30-0, there's a section of the crowd that says they should have won 40-0. And it's the manner in which they're supposed to play, this entertainment principle. So it takes a certain personality to deal with all of that, and it's not just about their coaching ability. So you've got to be a little bit impervious to criticism, but you've got to play the PR game as well. And the Smith family, be it Tony or Brian or even Rowan, they don't do that. But it's part of what goes with the territory when it comes to Leeds. So I don't know if Paul Rowley is the automatic choice that the club will go to. I think they will have to look who is around. They will have to look at who can best develop this generation of talent that's coming through. And it won't be a short-term fix.
Did you infer from the statement that Rowan will go as a spectator on Friday when Leeds are at home to Leeds?
I would love him to, but I'd be very surprised. It's also, it's a poignant weekend for Leeds because not only is it the global MND round that's tied into Rob and obviously now what becomes a celebration of his life on Friday, which is going to be obviously an emotional occasion, the first time back at Headingley since his tragic passing, but also Sunday lunchtime is the annual Hall of Fame dinner. So 4 of the Leeds worthies are going to be put into the Hall of Fame. And Rowan obviously was invited to that with the whole of the first team squad and was a big supporter of learning about what the DNA of the club is and how that can be applied to people that join. And I would have hoped he would have been at that. I suspect now, he probably won't be at either. What he won't want to do, and his statement is quite clear, and I know that there's been a groundswell of voices that have wanted him out for quite a while, but if you actually read the statement that Leeds have put out, he's saying that now is the time he wanted to stand down because he didn't want to deflect in any way from what is happening on Friday at the club. I think if he was pictured on the big screen or he was bumping into people in the North Stand, that he would be doing exactly what he said he doesn't want to do. So no, I can't see him being there, but I would hope he might be there on Sunday at a lunch.
What do you think happened, like, behind closed doors? Obviously, he said it was a long-term plan, which is what his uncle said in the same statement, the parallel statement earlier this year. Long-term plan. Unfortunately, I won't be there. Do you think the decision? Obviously, the decision was made for him because he wanted to stay. But do you think he had an input into the timing of the announcement?
I think what falls into place is next week is a blank weekend for the internationals. So as a club, they will be looking at buying themselves as much time as they can to make this appointment. It may well be that it will be an interim appointment to the end of the season, a bit like Hull have done with John Cartwright, and get the person that they want, who will be, you would imagine, under contract at the moment, or possibly living on the other side of the world, and rather than rush them over, make some arrangements to start that with pre-season training next year. So I suspect that what the club will be doing by doing it now is just giving themselves 10 days before their next game. And that probably is why it's been done. I think had Rowan won at Hull on Saturday, even if it hadn't been a convincing win, that would have bought him this week. I think that's how perilous it was becoming, that once a section of the crowd, and it is a minority section, but it's a very vociferous one, you've lost them, then as a club you look at how does that relate to the economics. Will that stop people turning up? We don't need the focus of the major broadcaster running stories every day about the team. We need to take the pressure off. The pressure was at such a point after that defeat at Hull that I think the Leeds board would have decided that they needed to act. But I suspect they're just buying themselves time with it being an international round next weekend and Leeds not playing.
It's nice of you to give us some of your time, Phil. Where can people find you? Scratching Shed, 4020, 4020 Live. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, should they wish to, and obviously I wouldn't advise them to. Yeah, we're about. We've got our monthly magazine, 4020, the new edition, and just out. It's a tribute edition to Rob Burrow, as you would expect. We're on 4020 Live Mondays. I think we literally will be going back live again soon. We've been doing it on Zoom, but I think we're all going to meet in a studio in the not too distant future. So we'll be there. We're often at games. Just happy to talk to anybody anytime about anything on Twitter at Scratching Shed 2. If anyone wants to write something for us or talk to us about anything or come on the podcast, then just keep in touch.
Thanks for your time, Phil. I know you're busy. Cheers.